I'll turn it over to you, Julie. Would love to hear your reflections.
Great. Thank you so much, Aditi, and very happy to be here with all of you. Love this crowd. So, Julie Fernandez from the Rockefeller Family Fund. I guess I would start by saying I'm a funder who spent most of her career as an advocate. I'm a civil rights lawyer who loves research, who loves research for learning so I can get better at what I do and so we can all get better. So that's kind of where I fit into this world. And I love every time I hear Harihan do her thing, I learn more and feel like I have more to learn, both. But one of the things that you said, Hari, when you said policy is downstream from power, that's how I got into this work. I spent a number of years as a civil rights lobbyist in Washington, trying to pass bills that are in the interest of people of color and other groups, you know, women, LGBTQ, whatever, doing all of this work and doing it and winning sometimes and losing sometimes. And at a certain point realized I was working on a big campaign. I won't go too into it, but I was working on a big campaign where we in the elite space in Washington, we knew we had the right answer. We knew we had the right allies. We knew we were going to win, then we lost. And we did a debrief afterwards. And he was like, we lost because we don't have enough power. Because we have kind of like this elite power and access, but we're disconnected from the communities we purport to operate on behalf of. We don't really know what they need, so they don't really feel connected to what we're doing. So it's both a disconnect issue and a lack of recognition that where the real power is where we need to sit more often and understand who, if they don't have power, why not? And if they do, why isn't it working for us? So those are like my questions. And I actually started off by going around, because, you know, I like to learn, and just flew around the country talking to groups in states about why didn't you like this bill? And if you liked it, why didn't you help make it happen? And what were the barriers for you? And I learned like a ton. So yeah, policies downstream from power. And I also, just given my background, mostly in voting and democracy and elections work, I also am very, I believe in self-determination and that communities should be determining the outcomes. You know, sometimes when I talk to people in the progressive world about that, I'm really into democracy, and I talk about what we're doing to try and understand and support the building of power for communities of color to get what they want out of politics. You know what people often say to me? They often say, what if they don't want what you want? Right? Because they're not really into self-determination and power for communities to get what they want. They have an agenda they've already thought up, and they're just trying to figure out how they get it done. So, so I do have this deep belief in self-determination and democracy, that communities of color, and you said this too, Hari, folks closest to it know what the problem is, and they probably have the right idea about the problem that they want to solve. So how do I support their being able to have the tools to solve it? And part of that secret, what I've learned from many people on this screen, is organizing to build power, supporting entities that are in the business of building power for their constituents, and then being able to have a strategy to move that power to get outcomes that make the difference that they want. That's at least how I understand it from my teachers here on the screen. So the part that I'll talk about is narrative, because one of the things that I know that I had focused a lot on in this work that I do with the Democracy and Power Innovation Fund that's hosted at RFF, one of our big areas of inquiry is understanding trying to really understand people of color, African Americans, Black Americans, Latinos, other groups, Asian Americans. We hope to do some more work there to understand how people think about themselves and their power. Because part of why, and so I'm trying to get at this issue of, I want to understand people so that we can then support their being able to lean in more to feel that they are as powerful as they actually are to make change happen. Because I believe in collective action. So it's like, you talk to a lot of folks in the Black community, they're like, well, how am I going to change anything? You know, what am I going to do? This whole system is not built for me. So how do we support understanding what's going on in their head that makes them feel either powerful or not powerful? And then how do we go on a journey with them to help them feel more powerful so they'll lean in and act collectively and make change happen? So a lot of what we're trying to understand is the political ideology and beliefs and sort of assumptions that live in people's heads that determine how they show up politically, how they show up civic engagement-y, not politically like voting necessarily, but like show up in the world to make change happen. So, you know, in the world that I work in around democracy and elections, there's just very little studying of non-white people. And there's very little trying to understand people who aren't white. So, and there are all these assumptions about how people who aren't white think and how they, you know, operate. And so we're really trying to break down a lot of that to get at understanding and then supporting, and then the role that narrative then plays in organizing and building power and civic engagement. The last thing I'll say that I'm really interested in is this cultural piece around organizing. So part of it's like the narrative, what narrative people have in their heads, how do we create powerful narratives that operate to make change happen. But it's also part of like ideology is so big and culture drives so much of ideology. So we have all these ideological assumptions that we walk around with that are really constructed over time. They're not like they're just the only answer. There are these ideologies that have been constructed that we've now kind of bought into without even knowing it. So part of what I want to get at too is how do we deconstruct that and create new ideologies that really speak to people to bring them to a more progressive place. I mean, the obvious one that, you know, people all know about is like we just didn't believe in the 90s. When I became a lawyer in the 90s, we didn't believe if the Second Amendment meant that I could have what the Second Amendment means today. All of them. I mean, it's a small one, but like the whole idea that there's an actual right to own an assault weapon in my home, nobody thought that in the 90s. But we all think that now. What about that's the sort of, well, you know, it's the right to have a gun. No, it isn't. It's not the right to have a gun. What about our whole ideology about whether or not that CEOs are entitled to take all the profits of their companies? People believe that. Who did the work? I mean, not to be too radical about it, but like the whole notion that we default into an ideology that says that capitalists earn the money and workers just get the scraps. That's actually an ideology. That's not a truth. There's no truth in that. So how do we figure out, and obviously, you know, obviously anti-Black racism is an ideology. So like, how do we get at these ideologies about who has value, what matters, what does capital mean, how does it influence our world? All of that's going to get us a better country. And now can I say one last thing or am I over? My last thing is apparently the right knows this so well. They have seminars. I just was looking at one yesterday. They have seminars all about how, you know, what they need to do is to make sure that they're winning on culture because culture is ideology. I just saw some video yesterday. Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, is on a video talking about how they need to win culture's ideology, and ideology and culture are policy. So they can have their little policy wins, but if they don't win culture and ideology, they're going to lose. Right. So that's my, I hope that was on point. That's what I believe.